Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste, the Therapist Podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist, and I have a special guest who comes on once a month. I'm going to have him introduce himself to you all.
Hi, I'm Jermaine Morris. I'm a certified coach and consultant with a practice based around a DISC assessment. I like to work under the premise of self-awareness without judgment and kind of use that information to kind of help people, whether it be through personal development, dealing with things, just helping them maneuver through life. You know?
And when you say self awareness without judgment, he really means that. But also tell people about the DISC assessment. And because you said you work off the premise of that. So a little refresher for the new people.
So the DISC assessment is basically it's a test that's given that shows how an individual interacts with people, how we are with decision making. It can highlight the most ideal communication styles for us, potential blind spots in behavior. It's a really good, like a diagnostic. I was joking to say that human beings don't come with an owner's manual. This is basically ours. It shows how we are in our natural, where kind of where everything is okay. And then it shows our adaptive when we become aware of other people or find ourselves under stress or under pressure.
One of the I feel like grieving moments that people through after working with me for a few months is like realizing who people are in their life. And it's a struggle to realize that they've allowed certain things for so long, and they've adapted to their environment. It's just interesting how it shows just how malleable we are to adapt. And so just how we adapt to things that don't benefit us and don't allow us to be our authentic self, the same way we can adapt. I mean, go back to like our kind of baseline, and but it obviously it's hard when you've been maneuvering in a certain demeanor and way for so long.
Yeah, it's some people would refer to as conditioning. Some
Yeah.
people would just
Yep.
look at it as evolution or adaptation. We get into certain situations and we try to figure out the way to keep going. And sometimes we get conditioned to a certain behavior because of what's gone on, that even if that thing is no longer present, we've conditioned ourselves to being that way. Um, yeah, idea of it. Yeah, people who have small children who always come and get in bed with you, always sleep. Then all of a sudden you get the bed to yourself, but you still find yourself clinging to that side of the bed, the side of the mattress, because you're used to people being on your side. Or you could stretch out. Yeah, but I'm used to. So we can find ourselves being that way. We've got a full bed to stretch out on, but because we've been so conditioned to just bundle up in a corner, we have to be very proactive and intentional about breaking that behavior and that habit.
Yeah, I like that intentional. Speaking of kids, one of the things, so Jermaine and I, we come on once a month and we get to talk about a topic. And today, want to talk about, the kids are back in school. And prior to us getting online, we were kind of talking about just the different anxieties and mental health struggles that kids are having these days. And kind of want to talk through maybe some of the how, why it's happening, and thinking about like steps that you can take to kind of mitigate some of the struggles. One of the things that we started off talking about is that things were so different growing up for us, where because now we're seeing a lot more identified struggles that kids are having, like anxiety for one, right? And we were saying how when we were younger, there was recess. We didn't have the games, we didn't have the phones, and we had to be outside. So that means we were actually moving our body. What are your thoughts about that piece when you think about how things were for kids back in the day?
Yeah, a lot of times we'll hear people now talking about kids are this or kids are that. I didn't go through that. I didn't feel that. A lot of it is we didn't know what we didn't know, so it was. I don't remember hearing the word anxiety till I was nearly an adult. So that wouldn't have come out of my mouth in the first grade. And then we had activities and things to, like, kind of talking about how with the test shows how we're adaptive. we would just naturally find things to deal with stuff. And it was more so, okay, that kids were had imaginary friends talking things out what they were feeling, make believe and pretending in the backyard, and kids were running around all day burning out that battery. What we call them hyperactive now, or different diagnoses. Back then they were just hyper, and they would just run around all day and kind of burn the little batteries out. There was just the food was different. Food, loaf bread had 3 ingredients instead of 32. Just there was just a lot of things that have contributed to how we were to how things are now.
Yeah, and then I want to be clear for people listening. It's not that people may not have had these issues, but I always talk about how when I was younger, I would listen to music on the radio. I used to have a cassette tape, put a little tissue in it to record like my favorite songs, and I used to journal. I used to write, right? So unbeknownst to me, like I was actually using coping skills to get through hard moments. So it's not that I wasn't struggling, but I had these things because they were forced on me. If I was outside, I had to stay outside. So now I'm running around and moving my body. I'm journaling, not calling it like coping skills. I'm listening to music at night. Like that's helping me like dysregulate and like calm my system down a little bit. Cause I used to love listening to like opera and jazz at night. And so, I want to be clear that like, yes, there was some struggles that you may have had as a kid, but also there was some things that was already kind of built in that was kind of really helping you like decompress a little bit. Would you say like that's accurate when you think about that?
Yeah, I think that we had more natural human connection for a lot of our coping mechanisms. A lot of it had to do with person to person. You know what I mean? Or so you journaling or writing stories or drawing pictures or tapping into those types of artistic things. We were just kind of you just kind of worked through stuff even if you didn't know you're working through stuff. I think now the upside, human beings have never had this much access to information in all of human history. I mean, you can literally learn about anything, anywhere, at any given time with our technological advances. But the level of being overwhelmed and sensory overload, it's before it was gradual. You could kind of spoon feed in your intake to a level that you could deal with. Whereas now you get bombarded with everything and you may
Mm-hmm.
find yourself more on the defense, trying
Mm-hmm.
to just cope and deal. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's a huge difference.
Yeah, when you say overloaded, just last night I was looking. So anytime I go on Netflix to find something, as soon as I see something I like, I click it because I'm like, I could be on here for a good 30, 45 minutes and won't find nothing. So yeah, there's the upside to that. But also because we're talking about kids, and even I say adults, we struggle too, but kids, they don't have as much opportunity to release as we do as adults. But I think about the comparison piece too. I think about like self-image and just like myself and my body. Like I felt like I didn't feel that comparison because there was no social media. Um every time I think about that, I'm like, these kids probably like, what do you mean there was no social media? There was no social media. The internet had like kind of just came out with like the AOL dial-up, like, um, but I say that because I compared myself to people in my neighborhood. We was from the same socioeconomic status. People who went to the schools I went to, same, we were dealing with the same. So, we could afford the same things. We kind of looked the same. The stars, I got to see them in the magazines that came out. I used to buy magazines and like put posters up of somebody that I liked. But now I think about these kids and how they have access to people in different socioeconomic statuses, and now looking at their life and feeling miserable. Like, what are your thoughts about how like the internet, because we talk about having access, which is great, but how the internet has probably played a role in people's like the children's mental health, and, adults too.
Huge. Like as a kid, I have multiple siblings, but my main comparison was the brother directly above me. So he was the one. He was a grade ahead of me in school. Like, we shared a room as kids. Like, if I'm thinking about my comparison, I'm talking about one person. You know what I mean? I couldn't imagine being a kid and just scrolling through millions of people and seeing how they're living or what they're doing, or comparing myself to somebody 2,000 miles away and what they're wearing to school and what they're doing, like, um, and all of that comparison. You start to think of, oh, okay, well, this person's 18 years old and they've already had 2 platinum albums and they got a makeup line and they got millions of dollars, and this, how come I don't? Okay, well, there's a whole lot of factors that separates you from that person, and it's not just about ability. uh, so not having that comparison type stuff, I think, is huge. It allows you to be more whatever you're going to be, as opposed to juxtaposing wherever you are to this countless number of other people with a bunch of circumstances and situations that you don't know how they got there. And then the percentage of that that's an actual representation of who they really are is incredibly small. You're taking somebody with their Super Bowl highlight reel, and you're comparing that to your day-to-day life, and you don't know how they got there or how much of that actually how they live. And if you do that hour upon hour, day after day, that can drastically change how you feel about yourself.
Oh my gosh, for sure. So we kind of like that's a little bit about like how it was, right?
Yeah.
And obviously things changed over the years. Social media. Jermaine briefly said something about foods, but um, you know, the McDonald's today wasn't like the McDonald's yesterday. The taste and the things that they've done to manufacture and produce, because everything is about money here in this
Yeah.
country. And so that's created a lot more struggles for people in general with their mood. I'm always gonna like whenever I can plug in how food plays a role in our mood, I'm gonna do that because we're just not taught that. A
Yeah.
commercial, when you talk about like how you're feeling, there's no commercial that's gonna say like, oh, what are you putting in your body? They're gonna give you something to like swallow and not look at what your habits are, which is unfortunate. I could do a whole episode on that. But so that's kind of like been the history, right? Now we fast forward, we had like a whole pandemic that the world experienced. And it's interesting because as it was happening and they started talking about like washing your hands and all this stuff, and they was talking about staying in the house. And all I could think about is like, oh my goodness, all these people are in the house and isolated. And I think about the kids, especially kids that didn't have siblings, or,
Yeah.
siblings that were like close in age. So they really had no one. So they went a couple of years without real like kind of social like interaction,
Yeah.
and trying to get back out there has been a struggle. What's your thoughts on how the pandemic kind of like excel kind of like the crisis with the kids being isolated, being at home alone without those skills?
So I think it's kind of two part that I've seen. I'm sure there's definitely more layered than that, but two parts that I've seen. One, the group of kids that were going into high school when the pandemic hit. There's a maturation process that typically goes on through our freshman to senior year. You come in as, kind of awkward, maybe ninth grade, and you're kind of not quite sure. You still see yourself maybe when you're in junior high, elementary school, but now you're starting to change a little bit. Like, it's kind of a weird, that awkward kind of phase. And you kind of figure out your position over the next few years. You start turning 15, 16, 17, maybe you get a job, maybe you learn to drive, you start going to your first dances, you start doing like all this sort of stuff you're kind of creating, within your social circle and community, and figure out, your interests and what do you want to do. Like, there's a process that maturing that happens. Well, for a bunch of our kids, that was removed. So they went to school, maybe their freshman or sophomore year, and then the years where they would have went to play the sport, which was going to pay for their college, which is how they're going to figure something out, or their first dances, their proms, their homecomings, their all these things that were the developmental phases getting ready to go into adulthood. All of that was removed from them, and then they were plugged back into society. mailed their diploma. They didn't even walk with their class, and now they're adults. And there was a lot of trial and error that typically happens within the constraint of school and home that didn't happen. And so some of the social cues and the learning to communicate and all that sort of stuff didn't happen. So there's an awkwardness of some of our young 20-year-olds trying to figure out how to get jobs, trying to maneuver through school. So there's that group that drastically got affected. And it's kind of an interesting thing I've seen with younger people who were starting school, like the smaller children who were getting ready to go into school, who were then not. So they were homeschooled. And where they would have been socialized more and started to go through those early phases of socialization through their first, second, third grade, that type of time period, they stayed at home longer, and more of them became more independent. Like they didn't become community based because they were still at home longer. And you're starting to see a little change there. I think it's going to be interesting what our society in the country looks like over the next 10 to 15 years post pandemic, when those younger ones are out now also. And then I think we're pretty far away to see the full effects of what the pandemic did across the board. I think we're everybody's back to work and we talking about we back outside, but there's still a whole lot of ripples that are still going to follow about what happened in that time period. But I think that it's going to be, we're starting to see this, it is still showing up in life. That fully answers your questions.
No, yeah, it does. Yeah, no, thank you. That's helpful. And that definitely, like, depending on where people were entering in school,
Yeah.
like that ninth grade, 8th to 9th grade year or 5th to 6th grade year, huge effects that have happened. And also parents were going through the pandemic, right? I think about how I am a therapist and was dealing with the same things other people were dealing with and trying to help them manage their struggles while trying to work through mine, as this was new for me. What part of, when it comes to, because I want to kind of lean into talking about self-awareness with the kids without judgment, right? But what part does parents play a role in kids' like mental health? Because I do think that sometimes, especially in our community, and it's not intentional. It's not, this is not. I'm not here to blame or like make anybody feel bad. I think it's learned behavior. But we're so used to like focusing on just like, well, I have bills and I have this, they're fine. You don't have anything to worry about. You're at home, you get to play on your game all day, whatever it is, not realizing that they are a human being with emotions, right? And when we do that to them, we're teaching them that their emotions don't matter at an early age. And so this is not a popular opinion in our community about kids and how they feel, but what part do you think parents play a role in this process for children?
Oh, they're huge. They're the architects of how this building is designed. So for a lot of us, okay, so I'm of a particular age. I got through high school pretty much pre-internet. So the internet started coming around. Like I graduated high school in 1996. So by the time I was graduating high school, it was still on Encyclopedia Britannica, Dewey Decimal System, And so for parents who are of my age, we still have an older way of seeing things, of how we processed emotion and what we dealt with. For a lot of them, especially if you graduated before me or just after, the concept of the internet and then bump up 10 years social media is not really in our thought process of how we think of our development, because it literally had nothing to do with our development. So the gravity we give it is not that strong, because it's like, yeah, it's just social media. It's just people showing you how they live, whatever. It's like watching a TV show. Like it just does. There's not a connection, because in our developmental years, it didn't exist. And so sometimes when we think about what we're addressing with our children, we have to remove ourselves in our life experience. And here's the hard part. We have to remove our life experience, our parents, our grandparents, everybody who came before us, because none of them went through this that the children who came after are going through. So there's no point of reference. So 50 years from now, 2006, 2007, 2008 will be looked at as a point of reference of where there was change in culture and society and communication with social media and that and whatnot. But if you graduate high school in the 80s, 90s, 70s, 60s, there is no comparison. There are other pivotal things that happen in life, and I take nothing away from that. But so when it pertains to children, it's so important that we can't lean on when I was a kid. We can't lean on, well, when I grew up, there are some base level principles and some ways to behave in that are universal, but there needs to be the space and the grace of, okay, this is an experience that I didn't have. And so me listening to you, referring to our children, there needs to be more significance put on that than maybe we naturally may lean on. It's like there's an experience that you're having. There's an overflow, an overstimulation, constant bombardment of all these other information and questions and people and situations that I never got at that rate, that you're getting at 6 years old, that you're trying to figure out and maneuver through. I don't have that life experience, so I'm going to need to lean on you explaining to me what you're going through. And I'm going to need to carve out that time to have that conversation.
I like that a lot. And I have two kind of thoughts. My first thought, so I appreciate you explaining it that way. I think that's helpful. Also, what I tell parents as they're talking about their kids is like, remember because they'll say, well, like I went through this and that, they have this and that. And I said, but their baseline is different, right? They're not starting from the point of like abusive home. They're starting with things, right? And so I think unfortunately parents will look at it in a negative way when things come up or they're feeling some struggles happening because like you said, they can't really understand it from that perspective, but it's their perspective and it's important to lean into it. Also, I want one time I remember you talked about as we're working on change, part of our identity has been that. And I think for parents, where there's like, when I have kids, I'm going to be this way, or my mama did it this way, and my grandmother did it this way. What part of identity plays a role in parents struggling with like seeing a perspective or trying to like change up a little bit about the way they're maneuvering things with their kids?
Yeah, because I mean, depending upon where you are in life when you start having children, for how long you've been thinking about this, been dreaming about the way you are going to parent. Now, whether that be from a position of I don't want to be like the parents I had, or I want to be just like them, or wherever we came up with the idea and got the energy, but there's a way we wanted to be, and the way we designed how we were going to be, there was a component of day-to-day life that did not exist to be put into our plan. So it's like, instead of thinking along, well, it's a phone or it's a YouTube or it's whatever, imagine if you lived someplace that never rained. So you created a whole world of how your day-to-day life was going to be predicated on the sun shining every day. Now, all of a sudden, it rains half the year. Okay, well, you can't still go at this schedule and how you're going to do your day-to-day life every day, like it's sun's out, and not incorporate this water outside. Like I have to make some changes, even though it wasn't a part of my original plan. And so being open in that respect of the identity of this is how I'm going to do it. Okay, you can still be you, but we're going to need some adaptation to happen to compensate. You can still be you, but you're going to need to be you with an umbrella. You know what I'm saying? You can still be you. I mean, you need to be you with a rain jacket on and some boots. Like, so there's some adjusting. And something you were saying, which I think is huge, is that for many of us born from a particular age, I guess you'd say backwards, to the ones that are grown now, most of us, our life was predicated on people, whereas a lot of these kids' lives is predicated on things.
That's true.
So we weren't four with a screen in our hand, flipping through videos and watching stuff. Things were not the portal to our experience. We were
Yeah.
with someone. We were
Mm-hmm.
doing something with some people. These
Mm-hmm.
kids now, their portal is a thing. It's a video game console. It's a cell phone. It's a thing that they're getting exposed to. that is fundamentally different than the way that we came up. And
Mhm.
so that needs to be incorporated. You may not have to completely abandon the idea of the thought process
Right.
of how you want to parent, but that's an ingredient that needs to be in the mix.
Yeah, I like that. And yeah, I want to get into like thinking about steps to work on awareness with the kids, but I also want to like say to parents, as you're working on this identity and working on shifting, look at what's not working and ask yourself, what's my goal? Because I think a lot of times we'll get stuck in, well, this is the way, or this is the way I know. But if it's not working, what's the goal do you want from your child? There's a lot of parents struggling with their kids may not be talking to them, or I seen a post, this psychologist I follow, Dr. Raquel Martin, um, talked about if your kids are afraid to speak to you. She works in colleges, so she was just kind of talking about how kids are afraid to call their parent and this and that. And I seen and she said, you were wrong. Like in the way that you did things. And people say, what if I did the best that I could? Doesn't change the effects that it has on the kids as they become adults. I see these adults and I hear the stories and I see where their lack of us being assertive or their inability to like speak up for themselves came from not having a place to speak in the home.
Yeah,
And so like that has to be a hard way to live. And if you're listening and you're like, oh, I'm seeing how I may have done things this way, or I could
yeah,
work on change. Have grace with yourself as you're listening to this, or as you're trying to work on the process. Because nobody has kids to say like, I don't want to have a relationship with my kid when they get old. Nobody like wants that in their life.
yeah,
And sometimes people really don't see the trajectory and how it got to that point because they'll tell themselves, but I gave them everything, right? Like those things aren't what they need,
yeah,
right? Like they do need a roof, clothes, but as far as like that internal stuff, like that's what can really get them through moments, not the Jordans, not the laptops or the iPads. Does that make
yeah.
sense?
No, very, very, very much so. And like self awareness without judgment. And when we look at, I understand the premise of I did the best I could with what I had, with the situation I was in, with the cards that I was dealt. I get that. No one.
Yeah, yeah.
This is not one of those where you go back to parents and say, "Well, you were wrong and you messed up and you did." Like it's understood
Mhm.
that, but some of that is that you're saying end result. Okay,
Yeah,
I worked all the time, or I did A, B, and C, but this is where my child is now. So let's
yeah,
just remove the judgment of why you did this or this didn't happen, or okay,
yeah.
fine. Like I'm not even here to debate or argue with you on that. But there are some things that these children need,
Mhm,
and it shows up when they don't get them.
mhm,
And there are struggles that they are going to have, and things, challenges that they're going to have to deal with when they do not have these things. And like the
mhm.
self-awareness component is in the sense of not knowing. So back it up. So if you don't learn the importance of self-awareness of how you are as an individual and how you react to things, um you can have hard problems with the emotional regulation.
Yep.
You can't identify what you're feeling, and you don't know what to do with it when you are.
That's a hard way to live life too.
Yeah. And so when we have kids who can't like have that struggle, they become adults who have that struggle.
Mhm.
The difference is the consequence level. When you become an adult and can't
I know.
regulate your emotions, the stakes get a lot higher.
Yeah.
But it's why it's so important.
Mhm.
It and it doesn't take a lot of time. Like, I mean, it's just one of those things that, like I said, I didn't grow up in an era where the phrase "let me teach self-awareness to my kid" ever came
Mhm.
up.
Nope,
I
not me either.
mean, that wasn't a conversation that I remember any
No.
parent having.
Mhm.
you know but then neither I also didn't grow up talking into a piece of plastic, metal, and glass where I'm seeing images of people 10,000 miles away on a
Right.
day-to-day basis. That wasn't a part of
Right.
my upbringing either. But the
Right.
same
Right.
way we
Right.
incorporated that, we can incorporate this.
Yeah, no, that's good. I want to lean into thinking about like, next steps. I want to start off with parents, right? Because you guys are listening, the kids aren't listening. One of the biggest things that I'm proud of is my intentionality on not just working on myself, but I'm still working. It's a daily thing. Um, and I think that that's the hard part is working on change within yourself, because the kids are looking at you, and how do you give to them if you're not giving to yourself? I think sometimes there are people that may have had a hard upbringing, and then they want to give their kids everything, and then they give themselves nothing. They put themselves on, like, people wouldn't look at that as like, what's wrong with that? Like, the kids have everything, but it just doesn't work, right? Long term, it doesn't work. It and I also think about the parents that like are struggling and just don't have anything to give to their kids, and don't know how to start the process of working on themselves. Um, and I think when people try to start working on themselves, there's this guilt, right? Or if they want to like take a few extra minutes before they walk in the house and deal with the kids, they have this guilt because they're taking time to themselves. They've never done that before. They've never like learned how to put themselves first. But I promise you, like I'm a podcast. I have I'm a wife, a mom, therapist. And I start my day with me intentionally, because I recognize that I have nothing to give to anyone if I haven't given it to myself. I've been in a position to like watch people break down literally, right? Lose their minds. And I see what happens when you don't give to yourself, when you're constantly giving to other people. So as I think about like awareness and stuff, I really want parents to um ask yourself, what did I do for myself to take care of myself? And again, I have, right in this stage in my life, I have a lot of privilege. I want to like name that, but I also want to know there was a time where I was a parent and didn't have a lot of privilege, and I started with what I had and I used what I had, right? So don't get into this comparison game of like, I don't have this or that. It was me like putting the kids to bed and working out in my living room. It was me waking up a little bit earlier, just having some tea before I had to do these things, and taking a deep breath, or writing, right? That was my luxury, and that felt great, right? And I'm really big on not comparing myself to others. So like I just like, my goal is always like, how do I make my today better than my yesterday? Like let that be your mantra. Because if you don't, you'll find yourself getting stuck in the barriers of what you don't have to get to what you need. Does that make sense?
Oh, a lot of sense. A lot of sense. It's really easy to imprison ourselves in our ideals. And so to think I don't have this, or I can't do that, or I don't have
Yeah.
enough time, or I don't have enough resources, or
Yeah.
like I said, something as simple as getting up 15 minutes earlier for tea,
Yeah.
you know, putting the kids to bed, maybe 20 minutes sooner. So
Yep.
you can have 20 minutes, 15 minutes to meditate to yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
you can find those little creases,
Yeah.
find those little spaces to make those adjustments for yourself.
The issue is like it's not talked about, because you said we could find these little creases, which we can, right?
Yeah.
We can create that time, but our culture sells us this like quick fix, or this thing where like you need this money, you need to buy this.
Yeah.
And so we get so caught up in the glitz and the glam of wellness in a like really packaged way.
Yeah.
And they don't talk about the little things. You got podcasts like mine, or platforms like mine, that give different tips, but a lot of people are looking to sell a product, right? I don't get paid by like telling you about taking care of your body and moving your body and stuff like that. Everybody's mindset's not there. And so like we're living in a culture that doesn't promote empowerment, self-empowerment in that way. Right. So it's unfortunately not on your forefront.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why when I talk about being intentional, that's why you got to be intentional, because we're not living in a country that wants you to be well. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Oh, very much so. And if they want you to be well, it's for something that you're buying from them.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And so to be mindful of these things, of saying, okay, is the current way I'm doing things working? Okay. If not, then I need to really make a point to make these changes. I mean, the same way if you have a job every day and you go to work every day, and you may not be thinking about what the job climate is. You're like, I got a job every day. But if all of a sudden, your rent increase and you need new brakes on the car, now you need to make more money. Okay, you're going to intentionally look for ways to make more money. You may go to your boss. Can I get a raise? Can I work some overtime? Can I get a second job? You're going to have an intentional attachment to an income increase because you realize this is necessary.
Right.
If we're going through life and there's just things that are not working, we have to have the intention of like, okay,
Yeah.
I need to make
For
a
sure.
conscious effort to do something
Yeah.
different. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to purposely get up and start looking for, okay, what can even use back to that phone, that internet, ways to
Mhm.
do this at home.
Mhm. I
You got
Google
in there
everything. Yeah,
Googling
I'm do
what
that. Yeah.
exercises can I do at home for free with
Yep.
2 small children that will help me, whatever.
Yep. You'll find it. I
Meditate,
promise you,
journaling, just
you'll find it.
yeah,
I promise you, you'll find it. Like, but we're not taught how to work on our barriers. We get stuck in them. And so the more you train your system to be like that, I can, somebody come to me with something and I'll be like, oh, I could see it already because I've already trained my mind to get into that
yeah,
mindset. So for me, it's really easy. And it wasn't always easy, but it was a muscle that I trained. And so now, like, that's where my mind goes. And so, okay, I can't do this, but what can I do?
yes.
Right.
That's
That's
why it's important with
important.
children to teach them while they're young for how they see
Mhm,
things as
mhm,
opposed, and the number one way to teach children about self-awareness is exactly what you're talking about is lead by example.
mhm. Yeah,
That
yeah.
if you can identify these things and you can understand what you're feeling, what to do with it, whatever, they'll see you do that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I love
You
that. Yeah.
know?
I love watching my kids texting me, "How am I feeling?" and telling me how they're feeling, and it's just, um, conversation that I wasn't accustomed to having, so, and we shop at the thrift store, you know what I mean? They don't have on the newest of nothing, but,
Yeah,
their insides are well, right? And so, like, we're not taught about, like, making sure our insides are well, we're just taught about climbing the ladder, so the profession, the marriage, the kid, whatever, like, right,
yeah,
the way society says, nobody's talking about, like, how are you feeling, what's happening internally. And so there's this thing that's happening where one's growing and the other's not. I don't want this without this, right?
yeah,
There's It's miserable. People are salivating over somebody in a big house. They're probably not they Some people are miserable. They have literally physically in having it. So the parents, so we talked about parents, right? And like taking care of themselves. When it comes to like work, because kids, school's about to start,
yeah,
right? Um, so there's a lot of uncontrolled elements that are about to happen for parents.
yeah.
What kind of advice would you give to them in regards to like helping their kids to be self-aware?
Um, so like I said, so if you're looking at some things to do. So like I said, number one is the lead by example. Is the number one. If you're aware of what's going on and can articulate what you're feeling and whatnot, kids will be more inclined to do that. I would say a big thing is encourage reflection. So when you get the kids come home and instead of just asking, how was your day? Or what was, okay, well, tell me something about it. Well, what does that mean to you? Like, what are you thinking? Like, explain to me your perception of what happened. Like, getting them in the habit of identifying, of actually looking at things beyond surface. Well, there was this kid and he was this and this. Well, why do you think he was like that? Or they did this. Well, how come? Well, explain it to me. Well, how did that make you feel? It was this. Okay. Anything else? Because a lot of times they'll give us one answer and we stop, but there's actually two or three. So it's like, what about this? Well, have you ever felt like that before?
Hmm.
And
And
go ahead.
sorry, my bad. What Jermaine's talking about doing with your kid, he said this earlier, but I'm gonna say it again. It requires intentionality,
Yes.
where you're putting them on your calendar the way you put your hair appointment or a football game or what you need to put them on your calendar. Period, because they need that dialogue. Like 10 minutes out your day is not going to mess up your day. You're gonna like it. Literally, will take 5 or 10 minutes to like minimum, right? Having a dialogue with your kids so that they can actually release and decompress these
Mhm.
things that are happening and you can help interrupt some cycles that might be taking place. But go ahead. I just want to say the intentionality behind this dialogue that they're going to have.
Oh no, that's exactly it. Because they came up with some idea in their head. That's how they interpret it. And then that becomes the loop of what's on repeat. So they've had since lunchtime at school this idea, this perception that they had, and what it means to them, and the loop begins. And if that loop is never questioned or challenged or whatever, that becomes the new loop. But if they come home and they've had it in their brain since noon and now they're home at 2, and then well, what is this? And then you explain it. Oh, that disrupts. This does not become a permanent loop of how they assess something. You're stopping it early and interjecting new information, or at least a new perspective of how to look at something. And then they starts to train them on the habit of looking at something. Because if you ask them questions about what their day is, what that meant to them, that becomes a pattern of, oh, she's going to ask me, what does this mean? Or what do I think? So I'm going to get in the habit of thinking, what does this mean? And what do I? So even if the day comes when you don't ask them, the loop becomes, what did I look at? What did it mean? What do I think? And that will become a pattern of becoming aware of how they see things and how they do things. So, but it starts with the intentions of, we used to do it, ask questions at dinner, for the people who want to do the throwback, we used to sit
When
down
you
and
ate
have
dinner at
dinner
the
at
table,
5
yeah.
or go to church. Then on the way home from church, well, what did you learn? And what did you do? I mean,
Yeah.
these aren't new, things. I just think that
Mm-mm.
we've gotten away from them. And then the increase of the distractions and obstacles in our thought process is dramatically increased. So it's just
Yeah.
kind of going back to that. So encouraging reflection is huge when you're talking
Mhm.
with children.
Yeah, I like the idea of that too, and also something that I do with my kids. How are you going to prepare for your day, and like, um, what are you looking forward to? What you're not looking forward to? So I get all the like the real stuff, not just all the like, oh yeah, we get to do this and that, but it's like, oh, I
Yeah.
hate this. I was like, oh, why do you hate it? And so what like Jermaine said, we're teaching kids how to reflect. Imagine like if you knew how, if I knew how to reflect, right? If I had that ability as a kid, a lot of the things that I struggled with as an adult wouldn't have happened. And also, you can use these same questions and thought process for yourself. In fact, I encourage you, I order you to do that because it'll make it easier for you to do that with your children as you're trying to develop this relationship to help foster that inside of them is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I think something we come to uh, snapshot decisions about things. We'll take something that may be big and we'll shrink it down to one sentence idea of something. So there could be multiple layered thing, and we just kind of turn it into this. And so
Mhm.
with kids, it's about teaching them to keep the layers.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
mindful activities.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something that's got layers to it, like one thing is like mindful eating. So if you got like small children,
Mhm.
you could say, well, what do grapes taste like? Grapes
Mhm.
are sweet or they're bitter. Are they? Okay, so let's get you 2 grapes, and then give the kid a grape. Put it in your mouth. Don't chew it. Just put it in your mouth. Okay, what does that taste like? Oh, well, it's
Mhm.
actually kind of rubbery. Like the skin on a grape is kind of okay. Now chew that. Just bite down on a little bit. Now what? Oh, well, the juice is kind of sweet. Okay,
Mhm.
take one bite. Okay, what's the inside of the grape taste? Well, it's kind of this, and then it's like the seeds. So the seed might be kind of hard. And so now they've got a 4 or 5 tier description of what eating a grape tastes like. Okay, now
Mhm.
eat a second grape, just put it in your mouth and chew it. Do they taste the same? No, because I just put it in there and chewed it up once and I didn't separate it. Okay, you ate 2 grapes that were same bunch, but they tasted okay. Why? Like you can have a mindful experience where they learn to look at something in layers and look at stuff, and you're eating grapes, but just
Mhm.
opportunities for them to get past the snapshot because the world right now is
Yeah.
hitting them with the snapshot.
Yep.
Everything is condensed down to a reel or a post or a picture
Yeah.
or a quick
Yeah.
video. Like everything keeps getting shortened and shortened and shortened and shortened. And so the having the tools to break something down. I'm not
Mhm.
just angry. What are you? I'm a little
Mhm.
frustrated. I'm a little hurt. I'm a little sad.
Yeah.
I'm a little this. The same 5 layers of the grape is the 5
Yeah.
layers of the experience I had. I
Yeah.
learned how to break this down. I don't just run with the one snapshot thought.
Yeah.
So there's things that we can do with kids that doesn't have to be a big, huge. session, but there's opportunities to
Yeah.
integrate these ideas and these tools.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about working on doing this, you don't have to wait till school start or if
Yeah,
school already started. Like the good thing about doing this is that when something's wrong, they'll be able to talk, right? It's hard. I think parents struggle because they really love their kids. They want to help their kids. And when they see their kids struggling and then they try to talk to them, it's kind of like we haven't really fostered that dialogue or relationship. So it makes it hard for them to talk to you. You feel like you're not, it's a lot of things that I think that goes on in parents' head when they can't be there for their kids or their kids won't allow them in.
yeah,
And that it's like it's a hard place for a parent to be in when their kids don't open up to them. So, I would encourage you to start small with these little things, intentional, giving them an appointment. I think, especially if they're young, you can like put them on your calendar and show them. I think
yeah.
like that's an amazing
That's
thing,
big.
just showing them how important they are. And not that they are not, but I think, kids have their own way of processing things, right? There's times I'm in the middle of something. If my daughter like is trying to talk to me, like, huh? And she's like, "Are you mad at me?" And I was like, "No, no, no." Like I'm in the middle of something, and the way I responded,
Yeah.
you can internal. But luckily, she's able to articulate that and not walk away and internalize it, right? So kids internalize things whether it's our intent or not. And so if we're able to have dialogue with them, we can learn that because we're helping them in their future.
Yes, and the thing about children is children don't need repetition for something to become a permanent memory.
Nah, it could be one time,
All it
like,
takes is one
yeah,
incident, one comment,
yeah,
one look, one
scary.
response, and
Yeah,
that becomes the loop
yeah,
from then on. So there
yeah,
the need to check in and to giving them the tools to verbalize and to be
yeah.
able to feeling like they can talk to you about something that does not
Mhm.
that's not going to result in I'm going to get in trouble if I tell
Right.
her she's the reason I'm upset
Right, right,
or
right,
he's
right.
the one that hurt my feelings. If I say, okay, now I'm going
Yeah,
to go from being upset with whatever happened to now I'm going to get in trouble. So, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
open those spaces to where children and still within the confines of respect. I'm not talking about let your kids
yeah.
cuss you out because that's what some parents,
No, no, yeah, no,
they
we ain't
don't
saying
like, they ain't gonna talk back to me.
that.
But it's like, but getting
I'll
in that space to
I'll
where they can identify what's going on, they can see it, and they feel comfortable in the sense of that they can talk to you.
Mhm,
And when in the same reflection that they show you, show back to them. I want you to know
mhm.
that when you open up with that to me, this is how I felt because I didn't have somebody who did that with me. So I really
Yeah,
appreciate it when you open up and talk to me about what's happening
yeah,
because then I can
yeah.
talk to you and we can talk to each other. And then the kid feels empowered. And
Yes,
when the kid
yes,
feels
yes.
empowered and over their emotions, they can regulate their emotions better. It helps them when it comes to
Yes.
decision making,
Yeah,
goal setting, focus, all this stuff. It's so
yeah.
multi-layered. Just something as simple as being aware of themselves.
Yes.
That's huge in a child's development and in adults as well.
Yeah, 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 I love that. Do you have any other thoughts about for parents as they're like thinking about this? This was such a great dialogue to really like kind
Um,
of dissect.
one thing, one I think one good game you can, if you will, you play with your kids if they're small, and then you can have a conversation a little bit older. Are empathy activities.
Mhm.
So, an empathy activity, the premise of it is to be able to see something from somebody else's perspective or somebody
Mhm.
else's shoes, basically, kind of. And so, you can do something if you're driving by and you see a dog in the front yard. What do you think that dog is thinking? Think if you were the dog is sitting in the front yard staring at the street. If you were the dog, what do you think the dog sees? Oh, well, I think it sees cars and it sees this and it sees. You see that guy standing there. What do you think his day has been going like? Oh, well, I mean, he
Mm.
looks his face. He looks like he might be kind of mad, but he might be tired, or he might be, the lady at the cashier. What do you think her? How do you think her day's been? Well, she was smiling a lot, so I think she might be having a good day. Like just the practice of seeing
I
things
like
from a
that.
perspective, not just their own. And that's a
Mhm.
that will start to the process of the brain will start to incorporate seeing things. The brain function will go to what they're thinking or possibly feeling as opposed to everything just being how I
I
see the world.
know. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think that's, you can do it as a game with little kids and like I said, even teenagers. What do you think that driver's thinking? Oh, they're about, just something for I think an activity or a tool that can help.
No, I like that a lot. That's really good. Because what we're giving today, what we gave today for people, is a different perspective. I know that, um, a whole nother perspective and a way for parents to think about their kids differently. You only know what you know.
Yeah,
So I really appreciate this dialogue. It's super needed. The kids are, just as human as we are. And I said that throughout the pandemic, as, I think like we kind of, the focus wasn't on them as much as it should have been, because we were surviving. It was scary. So, I think now, school's just another element, a huge element with so many different factors. You want to prepare them, not just with their new bag and their new sneakers and their new clothes, because that's the thing that happens every year, right? We take the first picture and show their new clothes, and it's like, did you talk to them today? Like, I really
yeah,
want to challenge parents to, not just focus on the outer, but also look at the inner.
yeah.
So
Nice.
thank you, Jermaine. This was dope. Tell people how they can reach you if they want to work with you, look you up.
If you have any questions about the assessment or any of the coaching programs I do, you can go to mykeystome.com. That's MYKEYSTOME, mykeystome.com. It'll give you more information on the assessment, kind of a breakdown and stuff, and you can set up a consultation and we can go over it in depth. And if you feel like you want to step forward and continue forward, we can get you started. And then all social media platforms are the same. They're all at J Morris CEO.
All right.